Now we have Gian-Leo, our team manager from the ESC. Perhaps, Gian-Leo, could you introduce yourself?
Then I'll maybe give you a brief overview on how we designed and built the car, because when saying building a car, you have to take those two things together. So I think the main thing with solar cars are trimmed for efficiency, right? And the main thing you want to achieve is aerodynamic efficiency. So that's also why this car looks like a spaceship, because it's trimmed for aerodynamic efficiency. And then that's really the main thing you want to do is optimizing it aerodynamically. So doing a lot of computer simulation, so-called CFD, computational fluid dynamics, where you just analyze and calculate the flow field around the car, designing it to have as little aerodynamic drag as possible. And then everything inside, it's very highly interlinked, what the aerodynamic does and what's inside. In the end, comes down to high or how low above the ground you're able to put your center of gravity. That in the end decides how good your solar car is, because that really defines the aerodynamics, then you're having a center of gravity really close to the ground. You can build a narrow solar car, more aerodynamic solar car. So that's in short how we designed it. I mean, there's much more to it. Designing the best PV cells, designing the best battery cells, designing the best, etc. And then building was the carbon fiber and all the stuff you see. From the outset was mostly done by ourselves. So laminating it, bringing molds to the milling partners, they milled out the molds, and we then laminating the stuff ourselves. For suspension parts, more metal parts, we mostly also delivered them to milling partners. We just designed them and did less stuff ourselves, but then did the assembly in our workshop. And also for the electrical things, I mean, battery cells and solar cells we bought them, but then all the low voltage system, that's all designed by ourselves, yeah. And then I cannot give you a recipe on how to build a solar car really in this short time, but that's roughly what you do. And then we began manufacturing around January 2023, and then finished it just before the race in 2023, August. So that was basically how you build a solar car, yeah.
Amazing. And I know that you had a lot of discussion between what design you want to choose. Could you maybe explain to the viewers why this type of design or form of the hull is good for aerodynamic drag?
So that's the stuff that happens on a live stream. That's what I had, the beauty of being live. Really, first of all, we have to understand there are basically two types of concepts for solar cars. There's the more, say, standard car, which you see is our car, which is a so-called monohull car. Which if the live stream then shows you some other cars, there are also catamaran cars, which more look like a catamaran for sailing. They're more, say, the classic solar cars, whether our car more resembles a classic normal electric or diesel, whatever car. And it's really, it closely interlinks with the regulations, what the regulations allow you to build. But in the end, such a car that we build allows you for the smallest frontal area, and in the end, for the more technical advanced viewers, it's really frontal area and coefficient of drag that makes up for the aerodynamic drag, which is like 75%. Driver, I actually 90 kilograms. Yeah, must be.
Charge. With that, how far can it drive on one full charge, but without recharging with solar energy?
So without solar energy,
Let's do without first, and then with.
I mean, with solar energy, okay, without first. Depends on the speed. Say you drive about 50 to 60, you go, I actually don't know the numbers really accurate by head, but 300 to 400 kilometers. And say with solar, so that was without solar before, but with solar, technically you could go endless distances. Really depends on the speed. Are you using more than you're getting in with the solar array? Depends on the time of day. Depends on how depends on many factors. But technically, you could go endless distance.
Fantastic. We had to go through a lot of scrutineering, and could you maybe explain to the viewers what were like the official requirements by the race committee?
So, as Danny mentioned, right, we had to go through scrutineering, both static and dynamic. In the static, it was more like, do we fulfill the rules? Like statically, for example, is the car to the correct dimensions? Is it also safe? Meaning mostly the electrical system, but also mechanical system. Do the brakes look good? Like, is it properly engineered? Is it not just some carbon or metal tubes glued together? Is it like proper engineering? But that's mostly fulfilling the regulations for fairness reasons, but then also safety reasons. Because in the end, we're driving on a racetrack. That's dangerous. We're having a lithium-ion battery with us. That needs to be properly handled. Otherwise, we can end up in a big fire and a big incident.
Interesting. And how do you deal, for instance, with ventilation? I know it's a solar race car. A lot of people asked us during interviews or events like, well, it must get really hot if you're driving in the sun. Do you have ventilation or something of that sort?
So ventilation is a big issue. From an engineer, all the engineers in the team, they don't want ventilation, for the reason that ventilation consumes energy, and you want to be as energy efficient as possible, so you don't want any ventilation, just because that's using up energy. On the other side, the drivers need some ventilation, because if this is really hermetically sealed, what it should be, it gets really hot, and it's CO2 reaches the air. So for Australia, we sort of had the luck that our car wasn't good enough. We had a lot of yes, ventilation makes you slower, but no ventilation can make the car crash if the driver isn't focused anymore. So that's really the trade-off you have to do. What is going to, in the end, how much risk you want to take, and what's how much energy you want to spend for driver's ventilation.
Yeah. And the race is quite different from the race in Australia. How did you have to adjust the car to fit the needs for this race?
That's also an interesting question. So we mostly, so this is more like a milestone in the design of the new car. So what we did is we mostly, we only did small improvements, meaning we improved sort of the brake efficiency. So before in Australia we had a lot of rubbing brakes, so just the brake pads that were constantly rubbing on our brake discs, which made us lose was really unnecessary loss of energy. What you also did is we got in a better inverter, so the thing that controls the motor, more efficient motor controller, let's say. And then we just improved the brakes for performance. Also, it's a track race here. You want to be able to have good brakes. Even though you want to drive efficient, you also want to have proper braking brakes. So yeah, that's some safety improving things we also did.
And I mean, the race is 24 hours long. For obvious reasons, it would be a bit hard to charge with solar energy during the night. And how will we drive overnight?
That's a good question. So for the viewers that don't know, we have a battery in the car. In Australia, it was just for giving us a bit more of autonomy, really not being too dependent on the sun. Here, we're allowed to charge our battery 3 times. We can do whenever we want. And the guys you saw before in the live stream, our strategy guys, they're calculating when we want to recharge. And yeah, we're allowed to recharge 3 times in total. And we have to do it as best timed as possible.
And when you recharge the car, do you have to stop for like 30 minutes and you have 30 minutes and you can't charge longer? Or do you have you can charge as long as you want and then continue? Are there rules?
Depends on the category you're taking part in. With our car, we have to stop for a minimum of 30 minutes. But we can extend our charging stop for up to 60 minutes. But that's the maximum we can do. So in total, 3 hours of full charging.
There's something happening in the background. We're not quite sure. It's a safety car, so perhaps the car broke down. Might be from the other Swiss team. We're not sure. We'll keep you informed and continue with the interview. What do you think will be the biggest challenge during this race?
So the biggest challenge with this race and with any other race also in Australia is endurance. So it's not a Formula 1 race that's really about speed and also Formula 1 race is about endurance, about reliability. But Formula 1 race takes about 1.5 hours. This race takes 24 hours, meaning you have to be able to drive 24 hours, and to finish first, you have to finish first, meaning you gain much more laps or do much more laps if you're just able to drive constantly. So here also, as within Australia, reliability is key. You don't want your car to break down at the side of the road. You don't want to have to do too many repair stops inside the pits. So it's just about having a car that runs reliably, just without you interfering with it, and just you're able to drive for those 24 hours.
In general, not specifically in our car, but what do you think is the technical part that will collapse most likely for doing 24 hours? Or you can't, or is there nothing that you can generalize in that sense?
I mean, that's difficult to say. We had, before the start of this race, we had some issues with our motor, with our battery. That's so naturally the thing we expect to fail first. However, it might also be that something really unexpected fails. However, all the mechanical system is tested 3,000 kilometers from Australia. I think the suspension works. The only thing I can imagine, what we also had issues with in Australia, is the steering, which it's not that it fails completely, that's for sure, but it's just that then we might do some maintenance on it, because it loosens a bit up. We have to tighten it again. That I think is the main issue we'll have to stop for. But also that I think the team has done a great job beforehand. So I'm actually, it might well be that we don't have to stop at all.
And as a team manager, what do you think? What is like the biggest difference or biggest challenge in this race compared to the Bridgestone World Solar Challenge?
That's a difficult question to ask, just to answer, because I didn't have the role of team manager in Australia, right? So in Australia, I was more technically involved, and let's say the logistics is way easier here, just because we're in Belgium. Belgium is in Europe. It's really easy to get the car here. That was a big hurdle for us in Australia, to get the car there. What's the big challenge here is we're a much larger team, which in Australia we had the team that worked on the car for almost a year, so they knew the car inside out. This team, they just started. It's their basically first race to get race experience, which is deliberately done. We want them to have their first race experience here, but it's a much different challenge, and you have to tackle things differently. You have to have. That's also the thing with a bigger team. You can have smaller tasks and have less all-rounders, but more specifically people that have their own really role, and they're expert for some, say, example, front suspension, one for the rear suspension. So that's really the advantage we can have here. So it's to sum it up. Logistics are way easier here in Belgium than they were in Australia, but say the team is more difficult to manage. It's a larger team, just naturally a large team is different to manage, and you have to be really more specific on how do you assign people to roles.
And if something like breaks down during the race, how do you communicate with the driver? Do you have a person who communicates with the driver constantly? How does that work?
So we have one person in charge for communicating the driver. Am I allowed to turn the camera, one of those camera? No, Daniel doesn't want to, because just behind this camera sits our radio man. He's talking to the driver constantly. We have a radio communication, which is basically just like you're on a phone call with the driver for those 2-hour stints that you have, and they're in itself communicating closely with the strategy, just so that they can give the driver the exact speed the driver should drive. Exactly.
Fantastic. We'll quickly check if we have any questions from the audience. What inspired you to be part of ACE?
That's a really nice question. So what inspired me initially is first of all, you have to say the challenge, Australia. Australia is a big pulling factor, also for new team members. But then for us, it was really cool is that before at ETH there was no solar car team existing. So we were the first people to do so, and we were also just like the ability for us to build up the car, build up the team, do something for future generations of solar car engineers. That's really something that inspired me to do, and that's also part why I'm still here in the team. After Australia, sort of my mission was done, but then considering what I initially joined ACE for, I wanted to go again and really give the new team some inspiration, also tell them what we learned from Australia, and just enable them to build a new and improved car. So that's really what inspired me to go to ACE.
Wow, that's a beautiful answer. What race did you prefer, Australia or Belgium?
So it's really. So first of all, that's the first European Solar Challenge also for me. Australia is really cool. It's a large adventure. You're there for like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. So it's a big thing. This is only 1 week. It's a different challenge in the end. And even though this is an endurance race, Australia is even a more endurance race, let's say. And I cannot say what I prefer more. I think I like both, but differently. Like they're so different races, you cannot compare them. And maybe just something that crossed my mind just before your for your first question. What inspired me to come to ACE? That's what I mentioned before. What inspired me to stay at ACE? That's sort of a bit different thing. Is so first of all, yes, building up that team, but then also having seen in Australia what the solar community is all about, helping each other. Yes, we are competitors, but in the end we're also just friends. We're helping each other out, going to other pit boxes. Hey, can you explain me your car? Yes, sure. We're happy to explain the cars, happy to lend tools, even motors, etc. That's something I really inspired me, and also the spirit of ACE to just, yes, there are challenges, but hey, it's not done until the race is over and we have not crossed the finish line. And that's also something, the biggest thing I took with me from Australia is, if someone would ask me what's the spirit of ACE, the spirit of ACE is, I have to say it in Swiss German, but Got's nicht, gibt's nicht. So if it's not working, no, that's not possible. There always is a way. And that's really something that made us finish the race in Australia, and it's really something that inspired me and motivated me, and that's something I took with me.
Wow. Okay, last question from the audience is, what is your favorite team besides ACE?
Oh, that's such a mean question. That's such a mean question. I mean, I cannot answer this question. There's so many nice teams around the paddock. I have to say, only to name a few of them, I mean, we're really good friends with Team Sonnenwagen Aachen from Germany. But then also with Inoptus Solar Racing from KU Leuven in Belgium, or Top Dutch Solar Racing from Groningen in the Netherlands. But it's an unfair question to ask, because all the teams here are so nice. It's really cool. Let's say those are the teams I have the most contact with, but I cannot say they're my favorite teams. The other teams are just such a large community. I don't know them all yet. But yeah. I'm sorry, can't give a definitive answer. I know that's such a mean thing to do to you guys, but no, I cannot, and I don't want to pick. They're all great friends of us, or of me. I don't know about the other guys, but of me, they're all great friends.
Well, thank you so much. We don't have any other questions. I mean, the audience and I, we wish you the best of luck and a lot of success in the almost 22 hours left. Yeah, best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on the live. Yeah, thanks for having me on the live stream. Thanks for joining in. You at home in Switzerland or wherever you are in the world. It's great sharing what we do with the world outside there. Thank you.
Thank you.